The dust cloud rose behind the galloping horse like a plume of blood-colored smoke, and it took Gabriel Hartford 3 full seconds to realize there was a woman being dragged at the end of that rope. His coffee cup hit the dirt as he launched himself from the porch of the trading post, sprinting toward his mare with a speed that surprised even him. The horse belonged to a group of cattle rustlers who had passed through Shoshone City, Idaho, just yesterday, and now they were fleeing north with whatever they had stolen, leaving destruction in their wake. Gabriel did not think, did not hesitate. He simply kicked his mare into a dead run, leaning low over her neck as the wind tore at his hat. The woman's body bounced and scraped across the hard, packed earth, her dress torn to shreds, blood marking the trail behind her like breadcrumbs in a nightmare. Gabriel's heart hammered against his ribs as he pushed his horse harder, gaining on the fleeing riders who seemed utterly unaware or unconcerned with their gruesome cargo. His hand went to the knife at his belt, the same blade his father had given him 15 years ago when he was just 13, and he thanked God it was sharp. He came alongside the dragging woman, his mare matching pace with the wild-eyed stallion ahead. Gabriel could see now that the rope was tied around her wrists, knotted so tight that her hands had turned purple. Her face was a mask of dirt and blood, her eyes closed, and he could not tell if she still lived. The thought that she might already be dead made something fierce and angry rise in his chest. He leaned down from his saddle, his muscles screaming with the effort, and sawed at the rope with his knife. The fibers parted with a snap that he felt more than heard, and suddenly the woman was tumbling free, rolling to a stop in a cloud of dust. Gabriel reined his mare around so hard she nearly sat on her haunches, then leaped from the saddle before she had fully stopped. He hit the ground running, stumbling to his knees beside the broken body of the woman who should not, by any reasonable measure, still be breathing. But she was. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, pained gasps, and when he carefully turned her over, her eyes fluttered open. They were the color of amber, he noticed stupidly, like honey held up to the sunlight. Beautiful eyes in a face that was rapidly swelling and bruising. "Easy now," he said, his voice rough with emotion he did not understand. "I have got you. You are safe." Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Gabriel looked around desperately. The creek was a quarter-mile east, he knew, hidden in a small depression where cottonwoods grew. Water. She needed water, and she needed it now. He slid his arms beneath her as gently as he could, feeling her flinch even at his careful touch. She was light, too light, as though the dragging had worn away her very substance. "I am going to carry you to water," he told her, meeting those amber eyes. "It is going to hurt, and I am sorry for that, but I cannot leave you here." She managed the smallest nod, and something in that tiny gesture of trust made his throat tighten. He stood, cradling her against his chest, and began to walk. His mare followed without being called, well-trained and steady. Each step felt like miles, and he could feel the woman trembling in his arms, fighting to stay conscious. The creek appeared before him like a miracle, the water running clear and cold over smooth stones. Gabriel waded in until he was knee-deep, then knelt slowly, letting the water flow around them both. He supported her head above the surface while the current washed away the worst of the blood and dirt. Her eyes had closed again, but her breathing seemed a little easier. "Stay with me," he said urgently. "Please stay with me." He did not know why it mattered so much. He had seen death before, had even dealt it when necessary in this hard land. But something about this woman, about her courage in opening her eyes and trusting him when she had every reason to fear all men, had worked its way under his skin in the space of minutes. Gabriel pulled his bandana from around his neck and soaked it in the cold water, then gently cleaned her face. The swelling was bad, one eye nearly shut, her lips split in two places. Her arms were raw from wrist to elbow where the rope had held her, and he did not want to think about what injuries might be hidden beneath her ruined dress. But she was alive. Against all odds, she was alive. "Can you drink?" he asked softly. Her good eye opened, and she nodded slightly. He cupped his hand, filled it with water, and brought it to her lips. She drank greedily, then coughed and whimpered at the pain the coughing caused. He gave her more water slowly, patiently, until she turned her head away. "My name is Gabriel Hartford," he said, still kneeling in the creek with her in his arms. "I am going to take you back to town. There is a doctor there, old Doc Brennan. He will fix you up." "Emma," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Emma Abbott, Emma." He said her name like a prayer. "That is a fine name. You are going to be all right, Emma. I promise you that." He did not know if it was a promise he could keep, but he meant it with every fiber of his being. Gabriel carried her from the creek and fashioned a travois using his bedroll and some rope from his saddlebags, tying it to his mare's saddle. It was the gentlest way to transport her, better than bouncing in a saddle or in his arms for the 6 miles back to Shoshone City. He laid her on the canvas as carefully as if she were made of glass, then led his mare at a walk, constantly looking back to make sure Emma still breathed. The sun was high and merciless, this July day in 1882, showing no kindness to the injured. Gabriel stopped every mile to give Emma water and check her wounds. Once, she opened her eyes and looked directly at him, and he saw something in that gaze that made his heart skip. Recognition, perhaps, or gratitude, or simply the connection between two souls who had met at the very edge of death. "Thank you," she whispered during one of these stops. "You do not need to thank me," Gabriel replied, crouching beside the travois. "Any decent man would have done the same. But you did it." Her hand moved, trembling, toward his, and without thinking he took it gently in his own, careful of her raw wrists. "You saved me." He wanted to say something profound, something worthy of the moment, but all that came out was, "I could not let them kill you." A tear tracked down her bruised cheek. "They already killed my father, shot him when he tried to stop them from taking our horses. I fought them, and one of them tied me to his saddle, said he would drag the fight right out of me." Her voice broke. "He nearly did." Gabriel felt rage bloom hot in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "They will answer for it. The sheriff in Shoshone City is a good man. He will track them down." "My father is still there," Emma said, anguish in her eyes. "At our homestead 5 miles south of town. He deserves a proper burial." "I will make sure he gets one," Gabriel promised. "But first, we get you to the doctor." The remainder of the journey passed in tense silence, broken only by the creak of the travois and the steady clip of his mare's hooves. Gabriel's mind raced with questions and emotions he could not name. He had been alone for so long, content with his work training horses and living in the small cabin at the edge of town. At 27 years old, he had convinced himself he was meant for solitude, that the right woman simply did not exist in this rough country. But now, with every glance back at Emma's pale face, he felt something shifting inside him. Like a door he had thought locked forever was suddenly opening. Shoshone City appeared on the horizon, a collection of weathered buildings clustered around a dusty main street. Gabriel led his mare directly to Doc Brennan's house, a neat white structure at the north end of town. He pounded on the door with enough force to rattle the frame. Doc Brennan appeared, gray-haired and spectacled, his expression shifting from annoyance to alarm in a heartbeat when he saw Emma on the travois. "Good Lord! Bring her inside, quickly." Between the two of them, they carried Emma into the surgery room and laid her on the examination table. Doc Brennan shooed Gabriel toward the door. "I need to examine her properly. Wait outside." "I am not leaving," Gabriel said flatly. "You are not family, son. She has no family left. They killed her father." The doctor's expression softened slightly. "Then wait in the parlor. I will call you when I know something." Gabriel paced the small parlor for what felt like hours but was probably only 40 minutes. He could hear low voices from the surgery, Emma's occasional gasps of pain, and each sound made him flinch. Finally, Doc Brennan emerged, wiping his hands on a towel. "She will live," he said without preamble. "It is a miracle, honestly. She has cracked ribs, severe bruising over most of her body, rope burns on her wrists and ankles, and more cuts and scrapes than I can count. But nothing is broken except the ribs, and those will heal with rest. She is tough, that one." Gabriel felt his knees weaken with relief. "Can I see her? She is asking for you." Doc Brennan's sharp eyes studied him. "You did a good thing today, Gabriel. Not many men would have risked themselves for a stranger." "It was not about risk," Gabriel said quietly. "It was about what was right." He entered the surgery room to find Emma cleaned and bandaged, lying beneath a white sheet. Her face was still swollen, but without the mask of blood and dirt. He could see the delicate bone structure beneath, the long dark lashes, the curve of her mouth. She was, he realized, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with her physical appearance and everything to do with the strength he could sense in her. "Gabriel," she said, and the way she said his name made something warm unfurl in his chest. He pulled a chair close to the table and sat down, taking her bandaged hand in his. "The doctor says you are going to be fine. He says I have you to thank for that. If you had not gotten me to water when you did, if you had not cleaned my wounds." She trailed off, her amber eyes filling with tears. "I thought I was going to die out there. I prayed for it toward the end, prayed for the dragging to just finish me." "I am glad God did not answer that prayer," Gabriel said, his voice rough. "So am I." She squeezed his hand weakly. "Will you help me bury my father?" "Of course. I will go out there tomorrow with the reverend and the undertaker. We will bring him back and lay him to rest properly." He hesitated, then added, "You should stay here, let the doctor look after you." "I want to be there," Emma said firmly. "He was all I had. You cannot ride, not with those ribs." "Then I will ride in a wagon. Please, Gabriel, I need to say goodbye." The determination in her voice told him there was no point in arguing. "All right, but you will rest until then, and you will do exactly what Doc Brennan tells you." A ghost of a smile touched her split lip. "You are very bossy for someone I just met." "I just dragged you away from death. I think that earns me a little bossiness." She laughed, then immediately groaned and clutched her ribs. "Do not make me laugh, it hurts." "Then stop being charming," he shot back, and was rewarded with another careful smile. Doc Brennan insisted Emma stay at his house for at least a week, sleeping in the spare bedroom where he could monitor her recovery. Gabriel visited twice a day, morning and evening, bringing fresh flowers from the meadow behind his cabin and books from the small collection in his home. He read to her when the pain kept her awake, his deep voice turning the words into something soothing. During these visits, they talked. Emma told him about growing up in Ohio, about her mother who had died of fever when she was 12, about traveling west with her father 3 years ago in search of a new start. She was 22 years old, she said, and had planned to be a teacher. There had been talk of opening a school in Shoshone City, and she had been so hopeful. Gabriel told her about his own past, about growing up in Idaho Territory, the son of a horse trader who had taught him everything about the animals. His mother had passed when he was young too, and he and his father had been close until the old man's heart gave out 5 years back. Since then, Gabriel had built his business breeding and training horses, earning a reputation throughout the territory for quality animals and fair dealing. "You are good with them," Emma observed during one visit. I can tell by the way your mare follows you. She trusts you completely. Horses are honest, Gabriel said. They do not lie or scheme. If you are fair with them, they are loyal forever. I wish people were more like that. Some are. He met her eyes. You are, she blushed, the color standing out against her fading bruises. You do not know me well enough to say that. I know enough. I know you fought for your horses even when it put you in danger. I know you were willing to endure being dragged rather than let those men think they had broken you. I know you are brave and stubborn and kind. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. That is enough. Emma looked away, but he could see the tears on her lashes. I do not feel brave. I feel scared and angry and lost. My father is gone, our homestead is abandoned, our horses are stolen. I have nothing left. You have your life, Gabriel said gently. That is not nothing. 3 days after Emma arrived at Doc Brennan's house, they made the journey to the Abbott homestead. Gabriel drove the wagon himself, taking the ruts and bumps as slowly as possible to spare Emma's ribs. She sat beside him, dressed in a borrowed black dress from the Reverend's wife, her face pale but determined. The homestead was small, just a cabin and a barn, but it was clear that John Abbott had been a man who took pride in his work. The fences were straight, the barn well maintained, and there in the yard lay the body of Emma's father, covered with a canvas tarp. Emma made a sound low in her throat, and Gabriel immediately reached for her hand. You do not have to look if you do not want to. I have to, she whispered. I have to see him. The Reverend and the undertaker, who had ridden out ahead of them, had prepared the body as best they could. Emma knelt beside her father, and Gabriel knelt with her, his arm around her shoulders as she wept. He said nothing, knowing there were no words that could ease this pain. He simply held her and let her grieve. They buried John Abbott in the small cemetery outside Shoshone City, beneath a pine tree with a view of the mountains. Emma stood straight and dry-eyed through the service, but Gabriel could see the effort it cost her. When it was over and the other mourners had drifted away, she remained at the graveside. He had such dreams for this place, she said quietly. He thought we could build something real here, something lasting. You still can, Gabriel said. The homestead is still yours. I cannot run it alone. I do not know the first thing about ranching. Then learn, or find a different dream. He turned to face her fully. Emma, you do not have to decide everything today. You have been through hell. Give yourself time to heal, to think, to breathe. She looked up at him, and in her amber eyes he saw something shift. Why are you being so kind to me? Because you deserve kindness. The words came out more intense than he had intended. Because when I saw you being dragged behind that horse, something in me recognized something in you. I cannot explain it better than that. Emma reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle on his bearded jaw. I feel it too, this connection. It does not make sense, but it is there. Gabriel covered her hand with his own. Maybe it does not need to make sense. Maybe not. They stood there in the cemetery as the sun sank lower. Two people who had found each other in the midst of violence and loss, and recognized that what was beginning between them was worth holding on to. Over the following weeks, as Emma grew stronger, the connection between them deepened into something neither could deny. Gabriel continued his visits, but they were no longer about checking on a patient. They were about two people discovering each other, learning the small details that made up a life. Emma loved to read, especially poetry, though she was embarrassed to admit it. Gabriel had a beautiful singing voice that he only used when he thought no one was listening. Emma could cook surprisingly well, having learned from her mother. Gabriel was terrible at it, living mostly on beans and bacon. You need a wife, Emma teased one evening as they sat on Doc Brennan's porch, watching the stars come out. I need someone who can tolerate my cooking, you mean, Gabriel replied, but his eyes were serious when he looked at her. "Emma, I want to talk to you about something." Her heart began to race. "All right. Your homestead. It is sitting empty, and that is a waste. The land is good, and your father had made a real start on it, but you are right that you cannot run it alone, not at first." He took a deep breath. "I am not saying this the way I planned, but here it is. I care about you, more than I have ever cared about anyone. These past few weeks, getting to know you, they have been the best of my life. And I know it is too soon, and I know you have been through so much, but I cannot not say it. I am falling in love with you, Emma Abbott." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, joyful tears. "Gabriel Hartford, I am falling in love with you too. I have been, since the moment you carried me to the water and promised I would be all right. Maybe even before that, when I opened my eyes and saw you cutting me free." He cupped her face in his hands, careful of the fading bruises. "Then let me court you properly. Let me show you what kind of man I am, what kind of life we could build together. And when you are ready, when you are healed in body and spirit, if you still feel the same way, I will ask you to marry me. And if I say I am ready now?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you," she thought about it, really thought about it. Her father had just died. She had nearly died herself. By all rights, she should be drowning in grief and trauma. But instead, she felt alive. Gabriel had saved her life, yes, but more than that, he had reminded her that life was worth living, that there was still goodness in the world, still kindness, still love. "I am not saying we should marry tomorrow," she said carefully. "But I am saying that I know my own heart, and I know what I feel. I do not need months of courting to know that you are a good man, Gabriel. I do not need proof of something I have already seen with my own eyes." Gabriel's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Then I will court you anyway, because you deserve romance and flowers and all the things I probably do not know how to give but will do my best to learn. Just be yourself," Emma said. "That is all I need." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and careful, and Emma felt something inside her that had been broken and bleeding begin to knit back together. This man had saved her life, and now he was teaching her how to live it again. The courting period was everything Gabriel promised and more. He took Emma on picnics by the creek where he had first brought her, the water now a symbol of healing rather than desperation. He taught her to ride again, patiently helping her overcome the fear that had lodged in her heart since the dragging. He introduced her to his horses, including a gentle mare named Daisy who seemed to sense Emma's nervousness and was extra careful with her. Emma, for her part, brought light into Gabriel's previously solitary existence. She cooked meals in his small cabin, filling it with scents and laughter it had never known. She organized his chaotic bookshelf and teased him about his terrible handwriting. She sat with him in the evenings while he worked with young horses, offering encouragement and asking questions that showed she was genuinely interested in his craft. 3 months after the day Gabriel cut her free from that rope, he took Emma back to the creek at sunset and got down on one knee. "Emma Abbott," he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness he felt. "You have changed my life in ways I cannot fully express. You have taken a lonely man and shown him what it means to have a partner, a companion, a love. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life making you as happy as you make me. Will you marry me?" The ring he offered was simple, a silver band with a small sapphire, but Emma looked at it as though it were the finest jewel in the world. "Yes," she said, her voice ringing clear and certain. "Yes, Gabriel, I will marry you." They were married in September of 1882 in the same church where they had held John Abbott's funeral. It was a small ceremony, attended by the people of Shoshone City who had watched the romance bloom and approved wholeheartedly. Doc Brennan gave Emma away, standing in for her father with tears in his eyes. The Reverend spoke about love rising from ashes, about hope surviving even in the darkest times. When Gabriel kissed his bride, the small congregation erupted in applause, and Emma laughed against his lips, the sound free and joyous. They celebrated with a dance at the town hall, where Gabriel surprised everyone, including Emma, by proving he could waltz quite well when properly motivated. "You have been holding out on me," Emma accused as he spun her across the floor. "I have to keep some mystery alive," Gabriel replied, his eyes twinkling. "After months of courting, I think the mystery is mostly solved. Mostly is not completely." They moved into Emma's homestead, combining it with Gabriel's horse training operation. It was hard work, building a life together, but they threw themselves into it with determination and joy. Gabriel taught Emma about horses, and she proved to be a natural, with a gentle touch and an intuitive understanding of the animals. Emma taught Gabriel about crops and planning, helping him diversify beyond just horse breeding. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains and talk about everything and nothing. They discussed their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future. Gabriel wanted children, he admitted shyly, having always imagined passing on his knowledge to a son or daughter. Emma wanted the same, though she was nervous about childbirth after hearing stories from other women. "I will be with you every step of the way," Gabriel promised. "Whatever comes, we face it together." "Together," Emma echoed and sealed the promise with a kiss. The first year of their marriage was marked by hard work and deep happiness. They expanded the barn, added fencing, and bought a small herd of cattle to supplement the horse breeding. Gabriel's reputation brought buyers from across Idaho Territory and beyond, and Emma's careful record keeping ensured they always knew exactly where they stood financially. But more than the business success, it was the small moments that defined their life together. Gabriel bringing Emma wildflowers on his way back from checking the herd. Emma surprising Gabriel with his favorite pie on a random Tuesday. The way they moved around each other in the cabin, a choreographed dance of domesticity that felt natural and right. The nights spent in each other's arms, talking until sleep claimed them, or sometimes not talking at all, simply holding each other and marveling at the gift of this love. In the spring of 1883, Emma discovered she was pregnant. She told Gabriel over breakfast, unable to contain her joy even though she had planned to wait for a more romantic moment. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He let out a whoop of delight, swept her into his arms, and spun her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "Careful," she gasped. The baby is fine," Gabriel said, but he set her down gently anyway, then immediately knelt and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there. This is your father. I just want you to know you are already the most loved child in the Idaho Territory." Emma ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "You are going to be such a good father." "I am going to try," Gabriel said seriously, looking up at her. "I am going to give this child everything I never had, a mother and a father who love each other, stability, safety, happiness. We will give all that together," Emma corrected gently. The pregnancy was not easy. Emma suffered from terrible morning sickness in the first months, and Gabriel learned to braid her hair and hold the basin for her without complaint. As she grew larger, her back ached constantly, and Gabriel would massage it every night, his strong hands working out the knots. When her ankles swelled in the summer heat, he would bring her cool water and prop her feet up, refusing to let her work no matter how much she protested. "You are growing our child," he would say. "That is work enough." Their son was born in November of 1883, during an early snowstorm that left Gabriel panicking about whether Doc Brennan would make it in time. He did, barely, arriving just as Emma's labor intensified. Gabriel held his wife's hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement and love, his face white with worry when the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect. Gabriel wept openly. "A son," he said in wonder. "We have a son." They named him John, after Emma's father, with the middle name Gabriel, continuing the tradition of names in the Hartford line. Little John was a healthy baby with his mother's amber eyes and his father's dark hair, and from the moment he drew breath, he was the center of his parents' world. Gabriel proved to be every bit the devoted father Emma had known he would be. He would walk the floor with John for hours when the baby was colicky, singing the old songs his own father had sung to him. He fashioned a cradle from wood he carved himself, each spindle perfect and smooth. He spoke to his son constantly, telling him about the horses, about the mountains, about the beautiful brave woman who was his mother. Emma recovered slowly from the birth, and Gabriel took over many of the household duties without being asked, learning to cook simple meals and even attempting to do laundry, though he admitted defeat on that task after turning several items pink. Watching him care for their son with such tenderness made Emma fall even deeper in love with her husband, if such a thing were possible. As John grew from infant to toddler, the homestead thrived. Word of Gabriel's horses spread farther, and they were able to hire help, a young man named Thomas, who proved reliable and hardworking. This freed up time for Emma and Gabriel to focus on their family, and they treasured these years, watching their son take his first steps, say his first words, develop his own personality. John was fearless, just like his parents, climbing everything in sight and showing an early affinity for the horses. Gabriel would take him into the corrals, holding him safely while the gentle mares snuffled at the toddler's hair. Emma would watch from the porch, her hand resting on her stomach where a second child was growing, and feel a peace she had never imagined possible. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1886, an easier birth than John's had been, though no less emotional. They named her Grace Helen Hartford, and she was her brother's opposite in temperament, calm and thoughtful where John was energetic and bold. Gabriel loved his daughter with a fierce protectiveness that sometimes made Emma laugh. "She is not made of glass," Emma would say when Gabriel fussed over the baby. "I know," Gabriel would reply, but he would continue to fuss anyway, unable to help himself. The years rolled on, marked by the milestones of family life. John's first day of school at the new schoolhouse in Shoshone City, where Emma had volunteered to teach, fulfilling her old dream in a new way. Grace's first words, spoken surprisingly early, which were of course Papa, much to Gabriel's delight and Emma's mock indignation. Christmases spent stringing popcorn and singing carols. Summers swimming in the creek that had once been a place of desperate salvation, and was now a place of joy. Gabriel and Emma's love did not fade with time but rather deepened, becoming something solid and unshakable. They still had their disagreements, of course. Emma thought Gabriel was too lenient with John, while Gabriel thought Emma worried too much about Grace. They argued about money sometimes, about how much to expand the operation, about whether to buy the adjacent land when it came up for sale. But they never went to bed angry. That was the promise they had made each other on their wedding night, and they kept it faithfully. Every argument ended with talking, with understanding, with compromise. And always, it ended with Gabriel pulling Emma into his arms and reminding her that they were a team, that nothing would ever change that. When John was 10 and Grace was 7, Emma sat her husband down one evening after the children were asleep and took his hand. "Do you remember the day you saved my life?" Gabriel's expression grew soft. "Every detail. I think about it often." "So do I. I think about how close I came to dying, and then I look at this life we have built, at our children sleeping in their beds, at this home we have made together, and I am overwhelmed by gratitude." She squeezed his hand. "You gave me all of this, Gabriel. You gave me a second chance at life, and then you gave me the most beautiful life I could have imagined." "Emma, you gave me just as much," Gabriel said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was going through the motions before you, working, eating, sleeping, but not really living. You taught me what it means to be truly alive. You gave me purpose and joy and a family I cherish more than my own life." "Then we are even," Emma said, smiling through her tears. "We are better than even. We are blessed." He kissed her then, and it was the same kiss as their first, soft and sweet and full of promise, but layered now with years of shared experience, of joy and sorrow weathered together, of a love that had been tested and proven true. The homestead continued to grow and prosper. John, as he grew older, showed his father's talent with horses, and Gabriel began teaching him the trade in earnest. Grace, meanwhile, had her mother's intelligence and love of learning, excelling in school and talking about becoming a teacher herself one day. Gabriel and Emma watched their children grow with pride and a bittersweet awareness of time passing. "They will leave us eventually," Emma said one night as they sat on their porch, now a much larger and more comfortable structure than the original. They had added a wing to the cabin, expanding it into a proper house befitting their success. "Not for years yet," Gabriel replied, though he felt the same pang she did. "And even when they do, we will have each other." "Always," Emma agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. They added to the family once more. A surprise pregnancy in 1891 that resulted in twin boys, Matthew and Marcus. Gabriel joked that they were making up for lost time, while Emma declared that their family was now complete, and Gabriel had better not get any more ideas. The twins were a handful, identical in appearance but opposite in personality, and they kept everyone on their toes. John, now 15, proved himself a responsible older brother, helping wrangle the twins when his parents were overwhelmed. Grace, at 12, was less enthusiastic about the babies at first but quickly became fiercely protective of them. The Hartford household was loud and chaotic and full of love, exactly as Gabriel and Emma had dreamed. As the 1890s progressed, Idaho changed around them. The territory became a state in 1890, and Shoshone City grew from a rough frontier town into a more established community. The railroad came through, bringing new opportunities and new people. Gabriel and Emma adapted with the times, modernizing their operation while holding on to the values that had always guided them. They were respected members of the community, known for their fair dealing and their generosity. Gabriel served on the town council, while Emma continued teaching and started a lending library in their home. They employed several people now, providing good wages and treating their workers with respect, remembering what it was like to struggle. But no matter how busy they became, Gabriel and Emma always made time for each other. They still took rides together when they could, sometimes revisiting the creek where Gabriel had carried Emma all those years ago. They still danced in their kitchen when a song struck them. They still talked late into the night, sharing their thoughts and dreams, their bond as strong as ever. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1902, Gabriel took Emma back to the exact spot where he had proposed. Their children had arranged it, conspiring with their father to give their parents a day to themselves. John was now 24 and essentially running the horse operation. Grace was 19 and teaching at the school. The twins were 11 and old enough to be left in their siblings' care for a day. Gabriel and Emma rode out to the creek on a perfect autumn morning, the aspens turning gold around them. When they reached the spot, Gabriel helped Emma down from her horse, and she saw that someone, probably John, had set up a picnic for them. "You old romantic," Emma said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I learned from the best," Gabriel replied. He pulled her close, and they stood together in the place where their future had begun, marveling at all they had built. 20 years, Emma said. "It feels like forever and like no time at all." "I would do it all again," Gabriel said. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you every single time. Even the part where I was being dragged behind a horse. Especially that part because it brought you to me." He grew serious. "Emma, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You are my partner, my best friend, the love of my life. These 20 years have been a gift I will never stop being grateful for." Emma kissed him, pouring 2 decades of love into that kiss. "Here is to 20 more," she said when they finally parted, "and 20 after that." "And 20 after that," Gabriel agreed. They spread out the picnic blanket and spent the day in the place that held so much meaning for them, talking and laughing and simply being together. When the sun began to set, Gabriel helped Emma pack everything up, and they rode home through the golden twilight, hand in hand, their horses walking side by side. At home, they found their children had prepared a celebration. The house was decorated, a cake waited on the table, and their friends from town had been invited. It was loud and joyous and chaotic, and Gabriel and Emma stood in the middle of it all, holding hands, their hearts full to overflowing. John stood to give a toast, his young wife Mary, whom he had married the previous year, standing beside him. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught me what love looks like, what commitment means, what it takes to build a life with someone and stick with it through everything. You are the example I hope to follow in my own marriage." Grace added her own words. "You showed me that a woman can be strong and capable and still have a beautiful romance, that I do not have to choose between independence and love. Thank you for that." Even the twins, usually too rambunctious for sentiment, had something to say. Matthew spoke while Marcus nodded along. "You are the best parents anyone could ask for. You never gave up on us even when we were terrors." "You are still terrors," Emma said, laughing through tears. After the party, when the guests had gone and the children had retreated to their rooms or their own homes, Gabriel and Emma climbed the stairs to their bedroom. The house was quiet now, peaceful in the way that only a well-loved home can be. Gabriel helped Emma out of her dress, his fingers as gentle now as they had been on their wedding night. They had both changed over the years, their faces lined with experience, their bodies marked by time and childbearing and hard work. But when Gabriel looked at Emma, he saw the same woman he had fallen in love with, brave and beautiful and infinitely precious. "What are you thinking?" Emma asked, catching his gaze. "That I am the luckiest man alive," Gabriel said simply. They lay down together, curled close despite the warmth of the night, and Emma thought about the journey that had brought them here. The violence and terror of that day 20 years ago felt like it had happened to different people. In a way, it had. She had been broken and lost then, and Gabriel had been lonely and adrift. Together they had found themselves. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Gabriel replied, his arms tightening around her. "Forever." The years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren as John and Grace started families of their own. The twins eventually settled down as well, Marcus taking over the cattle operation while Matthew surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer in boys. The Hartford homestead became a gathering place for the growing family, especially during holidays when the house would overflow with children and laughter. Gabriel and Emma aged together gracefully, their love never wavering. They still took their rides, though they went slower now, savoring rather than rushing. They still danced, though it was more swaying than spinning. They still talked late into the night, though now it was often about their children and grandchildren rather than their own dreams. On a summer day in 1912, 30 years after the day Gabriel had cut Emma free from that rope, they returned once more to the creek. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray, their movements slower but still sure. Gabriel helped Emma down to the water's edge and they sat together on the bank, their feet in the cool current. "Do you ever think about how different your life would have been if you had not been there that day?" Emma asked. "All the time," Gabriel admitted. "I would probably still be alone, living in that tiny cabin, working myself to exhaustion because I had nothing else. No purpose beyond the next horse to train, the next dollar to earn. And I would be dead," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Let us not romanticize it. Without you, I would not have survived. But you did survive, and you took that second chance and built something amazing, not just our life together, but your teaching, the library, the way you have touched so many lives in this community." Gabriel took her hand. "You saved me just as surely as I saved you, Emma. You just did it more slowly." "Maybe that is what love is," Emma mused. "A long, slow saving of each other. Day by day, year by year, we rescue each other from loneliness and despair, and the belief that we are meant to walk through life alone." "That is exactly what love is," Gabriel agreed. They sat by the creek until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. When they finally rose to leave, Gabriel pulled Emma into his arms and held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For saying yes. For building this life with me. For every day of these 30 years. Emma pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, those same eyes that had looked at her with such fierce determination as he cut her free from death. "Thank you for seeing me, for saving me, for loving me." "Always," Gabriel said, and kissed her as the sun set behind them, the creek singing its eternal song. They lived many more years together, surrounded by family and love and the legacy they had built. Their story became the stuff of local legend. The tale of the woman dragged behind a horse and the cowboy who saved her, and how that terrible moment had become the foundation for a love that lasted a lifetime. When Gabriel finally passed away in 1923 at the age of 68, Emma held his hand and whispered words of love until his very last breath. She followed him 3 years later, her body worn out but her heart still full. They were buried side by side in the cemetery outside Shoshone City, beneath a pine tree with a view of the mountains, not far from where John Abbott had been laid to rest 44 years earlier. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the graveside, telling stories about the remarkable couple who had shown them all what real love looked like. John, now 60 years old himself, spoke of his father's strength and gentleness. Grace, 57, remembered her mother's wisdom and courage. The twins, now 42, shared memories that made everyone laugh through their tears. And there, carved into the shared headstone, were the words that summed up their remarkable journey: Gabriel Hartford, 1855–1923, Emma Hartford, 1860–1926. He saved her life. She gave him a reason to live. Together, they built a love that death cannot end. Their story lived on in their descendants, in the homestead that remained in the family for generations, in the values they had instilled and the example they had set. Love could rise from the ashes of tragedy. Hope could survive the darkest moments. And two people who met at the very edge of death could find in each other a reason to embrace life with both hands. The creek where Gabriel had carried Emma still runs clear and cold, the water flowing over smooth stones, eternal and unchanging. And sometimes, on summer evenings when the light is just right, people swear they can see two figures sitting on the bank, holding hands, their love story continuing long after their bodies have turned to dust. A cowboy and the woman he saved, bound together forever by a love that began in violence and tragedy but became something beautiful, something lasting, something that proved that even in the wild and dangerous West, true love could not only survive but thrive, growing stronger with each passing year until it became the very foundation upon which a family, a legacy, and a legend were built.